Hello and welcome to the Media Show. I'm your host, Jack Houghton, and tonight we look at how many in the media seem to side more with a terrorist theocracy than the very vulnerable people slaughtered by the extremist Muslim state of Iran.
Another interesting thing about Anthony Albanese, Penny Wong and Richard Marles' statement, that first sentence, Australia stands with the brave people of Iran in their struggle against oppression. To me, that is political propaganda. What they actually mean, they don't say it, but what that sentence should say, if they're being accurate, if the Prime Minister of Australia is telling the truth, it should say Australia stands with Israel and the US in their new war on Iran.
Well, that was the ABC's America's editor, John Lyons, labelling as propaganda support for the strikes on Iran. Now, you pay for his opinion commentary to be dressed up as news. And the ABC defended it, arguing that their employee was actually an expert, so he didn't really need to be impartial. And this triggered a rare moment of unity across the political spectrum, where Lyons was savaged for being out of touch and for ignoring the plight of women beaten in the streets and the tens of thousands of protesters slaughtered for simply standing up to the radical Muslim regime.
This is an extraordinary claim, as if standing with women beaten in the streets is propaganda, if opposing the execution of protesters is propaganda, if resisting nuclear blackmail is propaganda, then we have lost our moral compass.
That was Labor Senator Raf Saccone showing us some moral clarity and showing us just how far the ABC has fallen. Because we know that the ABC endorses Lyons' viewpoint, from junior producers all the way to the highest levels of the organisation. Because here is his news boss, Justin Stevens, bizarrely grinning in a happy snap with staff as the bombs were being dropped. And while John Lyons was being given free rein to spew insane and deeply contested opinions, Stevens watched on in admiration. Now, Stevens, you're supposed to be a news boss, not a fan. Direct your team. Don't sit back and giggle for selfies while the most appalling content is being broadcast around our country at a severe cost to our wallets. It's yet again just another example of why the ABC is utterly broken and infiltrated by radicals with ugly agendas, and it must face radical reforms if we are expected to continue financing this rubbish. But the ABC wasn't the only organisation to give space for the cognitively impaired to speak. Over at Sunrise, commentator Amanda Rose was busy calling the slain Muslim terrorist leader, the same guy who slaughtered tens of thousands of his own people, a spiritual leader.
I think it's a bit arrogant of the Premier to say to a religious organisation, you can't mourn your spiritual leader, right? Because that's essentially what they're doing. Whether you agree with what they stood for or not, is he going to do it to the Catholic Church, to Buddhists, to synagogues and to other things if their leaders are doing something he doesn't agree with?
Yes, he should in all those situations. If there is a terrorist of any religion who runs a terror organisation which is listed, anyone who publicly celebrates the life of said terrorist should be locked up or deported. It isn't very hard. Ali Khamenei was an evil terrorist, not an interesting thought leader. And if you happen to think that he was a spiritual leader that you want to learn from, then you are probably a dangerous extremist. We should have no tolerance for the intolerant. Now, Sunrise host Nat Barr did a great job of pointing out the fact that Khamenei wasn't simply a cleric. But watch how this clueless commentator squirms when asked to condemn him as a tyrant.
Do you call the Ayatollah a tyrant?
I think most world leaders are tyrants.
How indoctrinated do you have to be to make a comment like that? Perhaps listen to the views of the people who fled Iran before you decide to go on national television and embarrass yourself. Perhaps look at scenes like this.
47 years of waiting, it's beyond words.
This is an incredible moment. Having freedom for the country is just amazing.
The people of Iran are on a mission to have freedom, and all the diaspora of Iranians out over the world are chanting and excited because we see freedom at hand.
Well, joining me this week to discuss is Adoni Media founder Lisa Goddard and, of course, the Menzies Research Centre's senior fellow Nick Cater, thanks for joining us on the desk.
It's a Good Friday.
Well, Lisa, why don't we start with you? This is fascinating how this conflict has played out in the media, and I think there are some commentators that have got it wildly wrong. I don't know where this has happened. I don't know where this has come from. This kind of sentiment that we're looking at anything that Israel does, anything that America does through this lens of skepticism that I don't think that we would apply to any other leader. And also the thing that particularly disturbs me when you're given this very mainstream, popular platform, it's a downplaying of someone's crimes and what I think is the biggest crime of all, misquoting what they are and trying to pass this bloke off as a cleric or a spiritual leader. I think that does a big disservice to the people of Iran.
Yeah, I think most people when they watch that went, spiritual leader? Like you're really taking some creative license with that. And I think most of all, it's a greatest insult to the Jewish people. Like the Jewish people would be looking at that and thinking, what is she on about? Now, I've done panels with Amanda Rose in years gone by, and she's a strong advocate for business. I think she should stay in her lane. I know on a panel you get asked questions that you're not an expert on, but I think she really overstepped the mark on this one. And you're right, she's coming out and she's to liken the fact that if this happened with the Catholic Church or Buddhists, so is she saying the Ayatollah and the Pope are in the same category? Like, it just doesn't make any sense what she's arguing.
Yeah, there's definitely this false equivalence. And Nick, you'd probably be standing there shoulder to shoulder with me if the Catholic Church was committing atrocities, saying no, this is horrible. They're committing acts of terror. And I think that we all agree we would call it out. And in this situation, it's kind of used as it's almost like a bargaining chip in this debate. Well, you can't say it because there are also other bad things that happen in the world.
I think it's a severe case of moral confusion, and they take their bearings from the fact that I think that they don't like Donald Trump, they don't like America, they don't like Israel, they don't like Bibi Netanyahu. Therefore, whoever is on the opposite side must be somehow virtuous. And that's the only reasoning I think you could get to this point. But it's absurd. Like, we all go on TV and get asked about things we're not particularly sure about. But this one's pretty obvious, isn't it? Who is the tyrant here? And yet Amanda Rose couldn't bring herself to use the word tyrant against the Ayatollah. All she could say was, well, he had tyrant-like behaviour.
Well, she said she put Donald Trump in the same category. She said, well, Trump has this godlike complex, so she likened Trump to the Ayatollah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, later on in the interview, I think she did make some concessions that there were tyrant behaviours. But I think more broadly, this suggestion that, well, all world leaders, it took her a long time to get there, and it was quite uncomfortable watching that. But I think I actually don't blame her, because I was watching, the New York Times was putting out obituaries saying hardline cleric is dead, aged 82 or however old he was when he died.
Rather understates his role in history, doesn't it? I mean, and Iran's role in history is the great sponsor of terrorism and the great disruptor of Middle East for the last 30 years or so. I mean, it's obviously much, much more preferable for Iran not to have nuclear weapons than to have them. And why people can't see that clearly, it just beats me.
Yeah, and Lisa, I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. Nick raises such a good point. All of this stems from this fervor of an argument that this is some kind of an illegal war. And we had the Prime Minister on today who was asked that, because the Greens are pushing this narrative. This is a very far left narrative, and it is so far left that it's even completely out of step with the way that Labor is looking at it. Anthony Albanese just looked in the camera and said, they've been doing attacks on our soil. They're attacking Australia. They're obviously an imminent threat. He didn't get into the ballistic missile information, but obviously there was the threats of the enriched uranium hitting near 60%. The only functional purpose for having uranium at that threshold obviously is to use it maliciously. And then you've got ballistic missile threat. And then you've got the fact that it's sponsoring attacks on foreign governments, including our own country. But then we have these commentators that are going there and almost quibbling about whether we're allowed to act.
But they're also arguing with the pictures that you're seeing coming out of Iran. You've got Iranians who are celebrating the fact that they may be able to take back their own country.
Isn't that just cognitive dissonance?
How do you watch that?
You've got these Arabic people that have been persecuted and Islamic themselves of faith. And so it's not about that. This isn't some kind of religious war where one faith's being demonized over another. It's about decades of systemic oppression, and you've got the left has fallen into this, and they have disgraced themselves over this topic. They've fallen into this trap where they're quibbling over the morality. And I think you're right. It's a great moral confusion.
Well, it is, and I think that it's not us who have politicised Islam. It is the Ayatollah. It is the Islamic State movement. That has deeply changed the nature of Islam and changed it into a force, an aggressive force that wants to commit acts of aggression against all its neighbours. I mean, we've seen that in the aftermath.
Who, the spiritual leader? Surely not the spiritual leader. He's just a cleric.
I think I'll stick to the Church of England, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's wise. Yeah, and I mean the association with the Christian. I mean, it's just such a red herring, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a bad faith argument, and one that I would say, yeah, we agree. If that was happening, it's not happening, by the way. But if it was happening, we would condemn terrorists in any form. I completely agree with that. Let's talk the ABC, because this is leading on from, I guess, what we've been speaking about, how there are people in Labor that I'm pleased are showing moral clarity. I think Chris Minns has been a very impressive force on extremism. I think Albo's had to be dragged there. Today, I was rather pleased that he was pushing back at this suggestion that it was illegal. And then you've obviously had that other Labor politician that was criticising John Lyons personally for his views. But then you've got the ABC is defending as an expert, and we'll get into whatever that means, because he doesn't have a PhD in it, and I don't think he has a PhD in the act of deciphering political messaging to determine whether it's propaganda. I'd love to see what that doctorate actually entails, but they defend him as an expert. They are so far out of step with even the left of politics that they're several steps further away. So the ABC's John Lyons, his view on that is dramatically out of step with the Labor government.
He is, and I think Lyons, unfortunately, has got in his head this notion that the Jewish state's to blame for everything. He's long had this view. He wrote a book some years back in which he personally criticised me as being a puppet of the Jewish lobby.
Get your vengeance now.
Exactly.
Take your shot now.
I'm not interested in vengeance, but I am interested in taxpayers' money being spent on people who know what they're talking about. Unfortunately, Lyons has this particular view about Israel and about Judaism, which distorts his whole thinking. And I think it was quite clear in that piece of, I guess we're supposed to call it analysis, that he gave, that he was way off beam. I mean, the idea that Donald Trump wouldn't be talking up America's interests, but was somehow tricked into talking up Israel's interests.
Being told what to say.
And it does come back to the fact that in the end of the day, we could not allow them to persist with their nuclear program. That's just fundamental. That's full stop.
In his mind, Jewish Israelis just must be just so infinitely clever that everyone just moves to the beat of their drum. Everyone just follows. I mean, Donald Trump, do we really think that Donald Trump is taking cues from anyone? I mean, is this a serious suggestion that one of the most volatile leaders that has ever happened in modern history is actually taking cues and listening to somebody else?
Well, and he was making the point that Netanyahu had been to the White House 7 times in the past year. Well, Netanyahu has a bit going on. There's a good reason why he would be at the White House. It's not to put words in the mouth of Donald Trump. And if you think that Donald Trump would let you put words in his mouth, I think that's a remarkably stupid statement to make.
There's another element to this as well. And Justin Stevens is the news boss. And you will have seen in my editorial at the top of this show, he's sitting there with a camera. There's bombs dropping, right? And so people are dying, and whether or not it's justified, there are people who are dying. He's sitting there in his newsroom taking happy snaps that we've got it up on the screen now, smiling, giggling with his staff, all while the time, there's another photo that he takes off to the sideline of John Lyons. While John Lyons is saying all of this, labelling things propaganda, his boss, the news boss, is just watching on as if with admiration, as if he's some kind of fan. Now, I would expect in a situation like this, at Sky News at 9, at 7, something like this is happening. A news boss is not going, they're not the mascot. They should be the person in the control room saying, move on, we need to qualify that statement. We've had a guest saying this, now let's get a guest from another, actually running the agenda. Instead, he's almost glorifying it from a public relations point of view. Is this guy just a lightweight or...
It shows in the ratings, doesn't it? It shows why people are not watching the ABC anymore. I mean, I hardly meet anybody who ever watches the thing or listens to the thing. Whereas even 10 years ago, if you're in journalism, you'd certainly listen because there'd be something worth hearing. Not now. It's just full of this quite bizarre and extreme commentary. I'd much rather watch somebody like Greg Sheridan talk about the Iranian situation, I'm going to get a lot more out of that than listening to this guy, expert or not.
Yeah.
It's strange though that there would be smiles. I don't want to be too critical. He's proud of his staff
But you're taking
doing
a
a
selfie
good
with
job.
someone behind you with their thumbs up while you've got,
There's bombs dropping.
Exactly.
And we actually went and he's deleted all the posts on LinkedIn now. So I don't know what that's about, whether he was asked to or whether he formed the view himself that it was not appropriate. Thankfully, we saved them all. But it's just a strange way, in my opinion, to run a newsroom. And for me, it's this problem we have with the personalities. You've got the Laura Tingles, you've got the Patricia Carvelis's. In my view, what it appears to be, for me, is that they run whatever they want to run. They have whatever opinions they want. And if the opinions are at odds with what a mainstream reasonable person would view, the ABC doesn't actually manage it. They defend them as being an expert. And so they've told Media Diary and put out a statement saying, well, he's an expert. I mean, an expert in what? Does writing a book on the Middle East make you de facto? I know he's spent time there. I've spent time in the Middle East. I've gone into Palestine. What are we talking about here?
His analysis is not factually based, is it? It's an opinion, it's a view, it's based on a fixed view of the world. And look, I mean, most people have to give their opinions to free. I don't know why I should be paying my taxes towards the ABC to allow people like John Lyons and Laura Tingle to hold court. You know, it's just not right. I find the ABC just a total irrelevance these days, really. I mean, compared to what it once was, which is a tragedy. I mean, it should be the front and centre of national life. It hasn't been for probably 30 years or more.
I used to think it had a place. The last couple of years, my views, I just don't see how it serves a good, and I think that it either needs to be reformed or shut down. But let's talk about things that have recently passed in quite a stunning way, and let's play the moment Kyle and Jackie O had this fight, which has potentially ended a $200 million deal.
But you're off with the fairies with.
Tell me where. No. Tell me where I've been off with the fairies during the show.
I don't have to prove anything.
No, you do. I am, Kyle. That I totally am offended by you saying something like that.
Too bad.
Okay, you're both going to have to help me figure out what is going on, Lisa.
All I'm going to start with is it clearly was not in the stars. Like this whole fight was about astrology, right? And her fascination with astrology.
Yes, you didn't predict it.
It was not in the stars.
Couldn't see it
that's
coming.
all I'm going to say. Look, I find it fascinating.
You're going to have a really bad month.
Yeah, exactly. You're about to blow up a $100 million deal. Anyway, but look, I find it fascinating how far this has cut into society, because I was at a function last night with very high-level executives. They were all talking about it. They all started with, we don't listen to the show, but they were all talking about what was happening and looking at it from a business perspective. What does this mean for ARN? Are they happy to be saving the money if the $100 million deal is off the table? So what's happening behind the scenes? And look, the country's fascinated by maths, and now they've moved on to Kyle and Jackie O.
What is the ARN business without this show?
It was extraordinary. I mean, this is a $200 million contract, right, between the two of them, $10 million a year each. Now, if the worst came to the worst and they've got to pay out the contracts, these two stars, that would be, less 1 year, or let's say roughly $85 million each, $170 million. Their entire revenue last year was only $280 million. So it would basically wipe out the company. I mean, recently we saw Channel 9 Radio, which is 3AW, 2GB, 6PR, etc., change hands, I think, for $56 million. Like they're getting paid 4 times as much as the whole worth of the 9 Radio network. It's plainly out of kilter, and it's been priced into the shares, which are now about 35 cents. I mean, 4 years ago, they were probably $3 or $4.
Nick Cater, Lisa Goddard, thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate you joining me on the desk.